The Dead Smile, Chapter 1. Sir Hugh Arkram smiled as he sat by the open window of his study in the late August afternoon. A curiously yellow cloud obscured the low sun, and the clear summer light turned lurid, as if it had been suddenly poisoned and polluted by the foul vapours of a plague. Sir Hugh's face seemed, at best, to be made of fine parchment drawn skin-tight over a wooden mask, in which two sunken eyes peered from far within. The eyes peered from under wrinkled lids, alive and watchful like toads in their holes, side by side and exactly alike. But as the light changed, a little yellow glare flashed in each. He smiled, stretching pale lips across discoloured teeth in an expression of profound self-satisfaction blended with the most unforgiving hatred and contempt for the human dull. Nurse MacDonald, who was 100 years old, said that when Sir Hugh smiled, he saw the faces of two women in hell, two dead women he had betrayed. The smile widened. The hideous disease of which Sir Hugh was dying had touched his brain. His son stood beside him, tall, white and delicate as an angel in a primitive picture. And though there was deep distress in his violet eyes as he looked at his father's face, he felt the shadow of that sickening smile stealing across his own lips, parting and drawing them against his will. It was like a bad dream, for he tried not to smile and smiled the more. Beside him, strangely like a warm angelic beauty, with the same shadowy golden hair, the same sad violet eyes, the same luminously pale face, Evelyn Warburton rested one hand upon his arm. As she looked into her uncle's eyes, she could not turn her own away, and she too knew that the deathly smile was hovering on her own red lips, drawing them tightly across her little teeth, while two bright tears ran down her cheeks to her mouth and dropped from the upper to the lower lip. The smile was like the shadow of death and the seal of damnation upon her pure young face. "Of course," said Sir Hugh very slowly, still looking out at the trees. "If you have made up your mind to be married, I cannot hinder you, and I don't suppose you attach the smallest importance to my consent." "Father!" exclaimed Gabriel reproachfully. "No, I do not deceive myself," continued the old man, smiling terribly. "You will marry when I am dead, though there is a very good reason why you had better not. Why you had better not," he repeated very emphatically, and he slowly turned his toad eyes upon the lovers. "What reason?" asked Evelyn in a frightened voice. "Never mind the reason, my dear. You will marry just as if it did not exist." There was a long pause. "Two gone," he said, his voice lowering strangely. "And two more will be four, altogether forever and ever. Burning, burning, burning bright." At the last words his head sank slowly back, and the little glare of his toad eyes disappeared under the swollen lids. Sir Hugh had fallen asleep, as he often did in his illness, even while speaking. Gabriel Arkram drew Evelyn away, and from the study they went out into the dim hall, softly closing the door behind them. Each audibly drew a breath, as though some sudden danger had passed. As they laid their hands in each other's, their strangely like eyes met in a long look in which love and perfect understanding were darkened by the secret terror of an unknown thing. Their pale faces reflected each other's fear. "It is his secret," said Evelyn at last. "He will never tell us what it is." "If he dies with it," answered Gabriel, "let it be on his own head." "On his head," echoed the dim hall. It was a strange echo. Some were frightened by it, for they said that if it were a real echo, it should repeat everything and not give back a phrase here and there, now speaking, now silent. Nurse MacDonald said that the Great Hall would never echo a prayer when an Ockram was to die, though it would give back curses 10 for 1. On his head, it repeated quite softly, and Evelyn startled and looked round. It is only the echo, said Gabriel, leading her away. They went out into the late afternoon light and sat upon a stone seat behind the chapel, which had been built on the end of the east wing. It was very still, not a breath stirred, and there was no sound near them. Only far off in the park a songbird was whistling the high prelude to the evening chorus. It is very lonely here, said Evelyn, taking Gabriel's hand nervously and speaking as if she dreaded to disturb the silence. If it were dark, I should be afraid. Of what? Of me? Gabriel's sad eyes turned to her. Oh no, never of you, but of the old Ockrams. They say they are just under our feet here in the north vault outside the chapel, all in their shrouds with no coffins, as they used to bury them. As they always will, as they will bury my father and me. They say an Ockram will not lie in a coffin. But it cannot be true. These are fairy tales, ghost stories. Evelyn nestled nearer to her companion, grasping his hand more tightly as the sun began to go down. Of course, but there is the story of old Sir Vernon, who was beheaded for treason under James II. The family brought his body back from the scaffold in an iron coffin with heavy locks and put it into the north vault. But ever afterwards, whenever the vault was opened to bury another of the family, they found the coffin wide open, the body standing upright against the wall, and the head rolled away in the corner smiling at it. As Uncle Hugh smiles, Evelyn shivered. Yes, I suppose so, answered Gabriel thoughtfully. Of course, I never saw it, and the vault has not been open for 30 years. None of us have died since then. And if Uncle Hugh dies, shall you? Evelyn stopped. Her beautiful thin face was quite white. Yes, I shall see him laid there too, with his secret, whatever it is. Gabriel sighed and pressed the girl's little hand. I do not like to think of it, she said unsteadily. Oh, Gabriel, what can the secret be? He said we had better not marry, not that he forbade it. But he said it so strangely, and he smiled. Ugh! Her small white teeth chattered with fear, and she looked over her shoulder while drawing still closer to Gabriel. And somehow I felt it in my own face. So did I, answered Gabriel in a low, nervous voice. Nurse MacDonald... He stopped abruptly. What? What did she... Oh, nothing. She has told me things... They would frighten you, dear. Come, it is growing chilly. He rose, but Evelyn held his hand in both of hers, still sitting and looking up into his face. But we shall be married just the same, Gabriel. Say that we shall. Of course, darling, of course. But while my father is so very ill, it is impossible. Oh, Gabriel, Gabriel, dear, I wish we were married now. Evelyn cried in sudden distress. I know that something will prevent it and keep us apart. Nothing shall. Nothing? Nothing human, said Gabriel Ockram, as she drew him down to her. And the faces that were so strangely alike met and touched. Gabriel knew that the kiss had a marvellous savour of evil. Evelyn's lips were like the cool breath of a sweet and mortal fear that neither of them understood, for they were young and innocent. Yet she drew him to her by the lightest touch, as a sensitive plant shivers, waves its thin leaves, and bends and closes softly upon what it wants. He let himself be drawn to her willingly, as he would even if her touch had been deadly and poisonous, for he strangely loved that half-voluptuous breath of fear, and he passionately desired the nameless evil something that lurked in her maiden lips. It is as if we loved in a strange dream, she said. I fear the waking, he murmured. We shall not wake, dear. When the dream is over, it will have already turned into death, so softly that we shall not know it. But until then—" She paused, her eyes seeking his, as their faces slowly came nearer. It was as if each had thoughts in their lips that foresaw and foreknew the other. "Until then?" she said again, very low, her mouth knit to his. "Dream till then," he murmured.